The Big Five personality traits, also known as the five-factor model, is a model based on common language descriptors of personality. These descriptors are grouped together using a statistical technique called factor analysis. This widely examined theory suggests five broad dimensions used by some psychologists to describe the human personality and psyche. The five factors have been defined as openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, often listed under the acronyms OCEAN and CANOE. Beneath each proposed global factor, a number of correlated and more specific primary factors are claimed. For example, extraversion is said to include such related qualities as gregariousness, assertiveness, excitement-seeking, warmth, activity, and positive emotions. Five factors: openness to experience, appreciation for art, emotion, adventure, unusual ideas, curiosity, and variety of experience. Openness reflects the degree of intellectual curiosity, creativity, and a preference for novelty and variety a person has. It is also described as the extent to which a person is imaginative or independent, and depicts a personal preference for a variety of activities over a strict routine. High openness can be perceived as unpredictability, a lack of focus. Moreover, individuals with high openness are said to pursue self-actualization specifically by seeking out intense, euphoric experiences, such as skydiving, living abroad, gambling, etc. Conversely, those with low openness seek to gain fulfillment through perseverance, and are characterized as pragmatic and data-driven, sometimes even perceived to be dogmatic and closed-minded. Some disagreement remains about how to interpret and contextualize the openness factor. Conscientiousness, a tendency to be organized and dependable, show self-discipline, act dutifully, aim for achievement, and prefer planned rather than spontaneous behavior. High conscientiousness is often perceived as stubborn and obsessive. Low conscientiousness are flexible and spontaneous, but can be perceived as sloppy and unreliable. Extraversion, energy, positive emotions, urgency, assertiveness, sociability, and the tendency to seek stimulation in the company of others, and talkativeness. High extraversion is often perceived as attention-seeking and domineering. Low extraversion causes a reserved, reflective personality, which can be perceived as aloof or self-absorbed. Agreeableness, a tendency to be compassionate and cooperative rather than suspicious and antagonistic towards others. It is also a measure of one's trusting and helpful nature, and whether a person is generally well-tempered or not. High agreeableness is often seen as naive or submissive. Low agreeableness personalities are often competitive or challenging people, which can be seen as argumentative or untrustworthy. Neuroticism, the tendency to experience unpleasant emotions easily, such as anger, anxiety, depression, and vulnerability. Neuroticism also refers to the degree of emotional stability and impulse control and is sometimes referred to by its low pole. Emotional stability. A high need for stability manifests as a stable and calm personality, but can be seen as uninspiring and unconcerned. A low need for stability causes a reactive and excitable personality, are often very dynamic individuals, but they can be perceived as unstable or insecure. No strong preferences, are adaptable, moderate and reasonable personalities, but can be perceived as unprincipled, inscrutable and calculating. The Big Five personality traits was the model to comprehend the relationship between personality and academic behaviors. This model was defined by several independent sets of researchers. These researchers began by studying relationships between a large number of known personality traits. They reduced the lists of these traits by 5 to 10-fold and then used factor analysis to group the remaining traits in order to find the underlying factors of personality. The initial model was advanced by Ernest Toops and Raymond Crystal in 1961, but failed to reach an academic audience until the 1980s. In 1990, J. M. Digman advanced his five-factor model of personality, which Louis Goldberg extended to the highest level of organization. These five overarching domains have been found to contain and subsume most known personality traits and are assumed to represent the basic structure behind all personality traits. At least 4 sets of researchers have worked independently for decades on this problem and have identified generally the same 5 factors. Toops and Crystal were first followed by Goldberg at the Oregon Research Institute, Cattell at the University of Illinois, and Costa and McRae at the National Institutes of Health. These 4 sets of researchers used somewhat different methods in finding the 5 traits, and thus each set of 5 factors has somewhat different names and definitions. However, all have been found to be highly intercorrelated and factor-analytically aligned. Studies indicate that the Big Five traits are not nearly as powerful in predicting and explaining actual behavior as of the more numerous facet or primary traits. Each of the Big Five personality traits contains 2 separate, but correlated, aspects reflecting a level of personality below the broad domains but above the many-facet scales that are also part of the Big Five. The aspects are labeled as follows: volatility and withdrawal for neuroticism, enthusiasm and assertiveness for extraversion, intellect and openness for openness, intellect, industriousness and orderliness for conscientiousness, and compassion and politeness for agreeableness. Openness to experience. Openness is a general appreciation for art, emotion, adventure, unusual ideas, imagination, curiosity, and variety of experience. People who are open to experience are intellectually curious, open to emotion, sensitive to beauty, and willing to try new things. They tend to be, when compared to closed people, more creative and more aware of the feelings. They are also more likely to hold unconventional beliefs. A particular individual, however, may have a high overall openness score and be interested in learning and exploring new cultures but have no great interest in art or poetry. Sample items: I have excellent ideas. I am quick to understand things. I use difficult words. I am full of ideas. I am not interested in abstractions. I do not have a good imagination. I have difficulty understanding abstract ideas. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a tendency to show self-discipline, act dutifully, and aim for achievement against measures or outside expectations. It is related to the way in which people control, regulate, and direct their impulses. High scores on conscientiousness indicate a preference for planned rather than spontaneous behavior. The average level of conscientiousness rises among young adults and then declines among older adults. Sample items: I am always prepared. I pay attention to details. I get chores done right away. I like order. I follow a schedule. I am exacting in my work. I leave my belongings around. I make mess of things. I often forget to put things back in the proper place. I shirk my duties. Extraversion. Extraversion is characterized by breadth of activities, urgency from external activity, situations, and energy creation from external means. The trait is marked by pronounced engagement with the external world. Extroverts enjoy interacting with people, and are often perceived as full of energy. They tend to be enthusiastic, action-oriented individuals. They possess high group visibility, like to talk, and assert themselves. Introverts have lower social engagement and energy levels than extroverts. They tend to seem quiet, low-key, deliberate, and less involved in the social world. Their lack of social involvement should not be interpreted as shyness or depression. Instead, they are more independent of the social world than extroverts. Introverts need less stimulation than extroverts and more time alone. This does not mean that they are unfriendly or antisocial, rather, they are reserved in social situations. Sample items: I am the life of the party. I don't mind being the center of attention. I feel comfortable around people. I start conversations. I talk to a lot of different people at parties. I don't talk a lot. I think a lot before I speak or act. I don't like to draw attention to myself. I am quiet around strangers. I have no intention of talking in large crowds. Agreeableness. The agreeableness trait reflects individual differences in general concern for social harmony. Agreeable individuals value getting along with others. They are generally considerate, kind, generous, trusting and trustworthy, helpful, and willing to compromise their interests with others. Agreeable people also have an optimistic view of human nature. Disagreeable individuals place self-interest above getting along with others. They are generally unconcerned with others' well-being, and are less likely to extend themselves for other people. Sometimes the skepticism about others' motives causes them to be suspicious, unfriendly, and uncooperative. Because agreeableness is a social trait, research has shown that one's agreeableness positively correlates with the quality of relationships with one's team members. Agreeableness also positively predicts transformational leadership skills. In a study conducted among 169 participants in leadership positions in a variety of professions, individuals were asked to take a personality test and have 2 evaluations completed by directly supervised subordinates. Leaders with high levels of agreeableness were more likely to be considered transformational rather than transactional. Although the relationship was not strong, it was the strongest of the Big 5 traits. However, the same study showed no predictive power of leadership effectiveness as evaluated by the leader's direct supervisor. Agreeableness, however, has been found to be negatively related to transactional leadership in the military. A study of Asian military units showed leaders with a high level of agreeableness to be more likely to receive a low rating for transformational leadership skills. Therefore, with further research, organizations may be able to determine an individual's potential for performance based on the personality traits. Sample items: I am interested in people. I sympathize with others' feelings. I have a soft heart. I take time out for others. I feel others' emotions. I make people feel at ease. I am not really interested in others. I insult people. I am not interested in other people's problems. I feel little concern for others. Neuroticism. Neuroticism is the tendency to experience negative emotions such as anger, anxiety, or depression. It is sometimes called emotional instability, or is reversed and referred to as emotional stability. According to Eysenk's theory of personality, neuroticism is interlinked with low tolerance for stress or aversive stimuli. Those who score high in neuroticism are emotionally reactive and vulnerable to stress. They are more likely to interpret ordinary situations as threatening, and minor frustrations as hopelessly difficult. The negative emotional reactions tend to persist for unusually long periods of time, which means they are often in a bad mood. For instance, neuroticism is connected to a pessimistic approach toward work, confidence that work impedes personal relationships, and apparent anxiety linked with work. Furthermore, those who score high on neuroticism may display more conductance reactivity than those who score low on neuroticism. These problems in emotional regulation can diminish the ability of a person scoring high on neuroticism to think clearly, make decisions, and cope effectively with stress. Lacking contentment in one's life achievements can correlate with high neuroticism scores and increase one's likelihood of falling into clinical depression. Moreover, individuals high in neuroticism tend to experience more negative life events. But neuroticism also changes in response to positive and negative life experiences. At the other end of the scale, individuals who score low in neuroticism are less easily upset and are less emotionally reactive. They tend to be calm, emotionally stable, and free from persistent negative feelings. Freedom from negative feelings does not mean that low scorers experience a lot of positive feelings. Neuroticism is similar but not identical to being neurotic in the Freudian sense. Some psychologists prefer to call neuroticism by the term emotional stability to differentiate it from the term neurotic in a career test. Sample items: I get irritated easily. I get stressed out easily. I get upset easily. I have frequent mood swings. I worry about things. I am much more anxious than most people. I am relaxed most of the time. I seldom feel blue. History. Early trait research. In 1884, Sir Francis Galton was the first person who is known to have investigated the hypothesis that it is possible to derive a comprehensive taxonomy of human personality traits by sampling language, the Lexical Hypothesis. Indiana, 1936, Gordon Allport and South. Oddbit put Sir Francis Galton's hypothesis into practice by extracting 4,504 adjectives which they believed were descriptive of observable and relatively permanent traits from the dictionaries at the time. In 1940, Raymond Cattell retained the adjectives and eliminated synonyms to reduce the total to 171. He constructed a self-report instrument for the clusters of personality traits he found from the adjectives, which he called the 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, based on a subset of only 20 of the 36 dimensions that Cattell had originally discovered. Ernest Toops and Raymond Crystal claimed to have found just 5 broad factors which they labeled urgency, agreeableness, dependability, emotional stability, and culture. Warren Norman subsequently relabeled dependability as conscientiousness. Hiatus in research. For the next 2 decades, the changing zeitgeist made publication of personality research difficult. In his 1968 book Personality and Assessment, Walter Mischel asserted that personality instruments could not predict behavior with a correlation of more than 0.3. Social psychologists like Mischel argued that attitudes and behavior were not stable, but varied with the situation. Predicting behavior from personality instruments was claimed to be impossible. However, it has subsequently been demonstrated empirically that the magnitude of the predictive correlations with real-life criteria can increase significantly under stressful emotional conditions, thereby accounting for a significantly greater proportion of the predictive variance. In addition, emerging methodologies challenged this point of view during the 1980s. Instead of trying to predict single instances of behavior, which was unreliable, researchers found that they could predict patterns of behavior by aggregating large numbers of observations. As a result, correlations between personality and behavior increased substantially, and it was clear that personality did in fact exist. Personality and social psychologists now generally agree that both personal and situational variables are needed to account for human behavior. Trait theories became justified, and there was a resurgence of interest in this area. In the 1980s, Louis Goldberg started his own lexical project, emphasizing 5 broad factors once again. He later coined the term Big Five as a label for the factors. renewed attention. In a 1980 symposium in Honolulu, 4 prominent researchers, Louis Goldberg, Naomi Takemoto-Chock, Andrew Comrie, and John M. Dickman, reviewed the available personality instruments of the day. This event was followed by widespread acceptance of the 5-factor model among personality researchers during the 1980s. Peter Saville and his team included the 5-factor Pentagon model with the original OPQ in 1984. Pentagon was closely followed by the NEO 5-factor personality inventory, published by Costa and McRae in 1985. However, the methodology employed in constructing the NEO-PIR instrument has been subjected to critical scrutiny.